We're here squashing 5 pieces of unhelpful wedding advice.
Hi, welcome back to Bride Society. I'm Laura and this is Rebecca. And as Rebecca said, we're here to, probably throw our opinions into the mix as well, because wedding planning time can be a time of anybody and everybody giving you unsolicited advice.
It's like having your first baby as well. Yeah. Everyone's.
So we thought we would round up some of the things that we think are unhelpful, and kind of say, and why?
Set the record straight, basically. Yeah. So one of the first things we've heard is you have to invite everyone. Right? Your parents are maybe like, oh, you have to invite little Timmy that's related to your cousin twice removed, and blah blah blah. Yeah. Okay. Obviously, like, how many people you invite is up to you and depends on your budget and what kind of wedding you want and that kind of thing. I appreciate there is an element of politics involved in wedding planning, and we're not saying it's easy to just ignore that. And a factor that might get involved in that is think about maybe who is paying for the wedding. So, like, if it is your parents, are there expectations of who you will invite that will come with that? So having those kind of discussions early on might dictate whether you have to invite everyone or not. And then just a quick thing about plus ones as well. Like, I think that's always a tricky topic because you maybe got capacity issues with the venue and that kind of thing. And if you are needing to feel like you need to restrict numbers, for me at least, with my kind of thoughts around plus ones, is basically if the person coming hasn't travelled from really far away and they're going to know other people at the wedding, then I don't think you necessarily need to give them a plus one, particularly if they're not with a long-term partner. Like, if the part of a group that's going to be there, they're not basically going to be stood there on their own or have to have travelled a really long way on their own to be there, then they're probably fine being there without said person.
If you know they're with a friendship group, other people, but
and they're not the only, it's not just one person you're not giving a plus one to in that whole group kind of thing. I personally,
and I think another thing is you want to look back on your wedding photos in years to come and know who was at your wedding. So if you're having to invite out of obligation distant family members that you may not have even met since you were a baby, will you recognise them on your wedding photos in 10, 15 years' time? Just something to think about. If you haven't got the money expectation, if you feel like you can stand up to people and say no, just invite who you want. Our next piece of unhelpful advice is don't worry about the budget, it's your special day. Now, we're all for you having like an amazing wedding day, having the wedding day that you want. But also you've got to be mindful, or we think you probably should be mindful of not putting yourself into any kind of long-term debt or unmanageable debt because of one day.
Yes. Yeah. So, we sit kind of down the middle of this piece of advice, don't we, typically? Because, we're not so being like, oh, it's just one day. Like, it's ridiculous spending a large amount of money on that. It as Laura said, it's about manageable versus unmanageable debt. And if that's something you feel you can comfortably deal with and get into, should that be necessary for the kind of things that you want for your day? Like, we're not saying do it, we're not saying don't do it, but I think we're saying you don't have to do it.
Yes. And if there are certain things that are important to you to have as part of the wedding, but you have got a limited budget that you can't necessarily have everything you might want, prioritise the things you can. There's always ways to work within budgets, ways to do things slightly differently, or just doing some statement pieces, say for decor or flowers, that will really have an impact and maybe create the atmosphere and environment that you want without necessarily taking you way over the budget you've set for yourselves.
Yes. And this segues quite nicely into the next piece of advice, which is DIY everything to save money. Now, this is something we've said quite a lot, and it may seem a bit contradictory given how many DIY tutorials there are on our channel, which there are a lot, and do check them out. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily save you money. It can, but it doesn't necessarily. And there's also a cost in terms of time, right? You might not physically have the time to make everything. And as we always say, it takes a lot longer to DIY something than you think it's going to, especially when you have to do it maybe 100 times over if it's like a favour or something for every guest. And so, yeah, being able to bulk buy this kind of thing, you know, for elements might be cheaper, but sometimes it's not the cost-effective way to go. So maybe there are some things you want to DIY and prioritise and decide where your DIY skills lie, and focus on that. And the things that you kind of really want to put your personal touch on and where that's going to be noticed and just where you want to spend the time. But yeah, don't get into DIYing everything unless you really want to and you've got a long lead time.
And you're not someone who procrastinates and leaves everything to the last minute. Because you may have 3 months, but then that quickly turns into 2 months, 1 month, and then the week before your wedding you're having to create hundreds and hundreds of things and you'll get very stressed.
Yes. Yeah. Particularly there's other things going on, you know, there's like maybe children or just like Christmas, like just things that get put in the diary, right? Like, yeah.
Manage expectations. You know what you're capable of. And if you enjoy doing it, great. But it's not necessarily going to save you money. Our next unhelpful piece of advice is that you have to stick to tradition. Now, I do think tradition has a place in weddings.
Mm-hmm. Make it feel like a wedding. Yeah. My brain goes, oh yeah, that was a wedding. Yeah.
But there are also a lot of traditions that are probably quite outdated now and might not fit within your values or just your ethos or just how you want your wedding to be. Mm-hmm. Now, to have a wedding, to get married, you just have to have the ceremony. And we've talked about like just the bare bones. If you were just going to do the very minimum about being married,
the legal bits that you have
what
to
you
have.
need to do. Everything else, you can do what you want.
Yeah, it's dressing.
Yeah. So don't feel like you have to stick to tradition unless you want to. Mm-hmm. You can go and do things differently. You don't have to have female bridesmaids, male groomsmen. You can have just bridal parties. You can have anybody in your wedding party.
Or no wedding party at all.
Exactly. You can do all sorts. You don't have to have a sit-down meal. You can go to the pub after the ceremony. You can just do whatever you want, basically.
Yeah, just whatever makes it feel like you and your partner and what will make your day special to you and your loved ones. Like, that's all anybody actually wants at the end of the day. Yeah. And we do have a whole video actually on modernising wedding traditions, if that's something you want to look at. So our final piece of unhelpful wedding advice that we're looking at today is don't worry about the details, everything will work out. So yes, we don't want you to stress about the teeny tiny little things, you know, it's at the end of the day, yes, what will be will be. and I think there is some truth to the fact that I think once you get to the wedding day, and this is something I remember trying to say to myself, which is almost in a couple of weeks, 9 years ago now, and I still remember like saying to someone like, you know, it's all out of my hands now, whatever unfolds, you know, whatever supplier does, or this, that and the other, it's just going to be what it's going to be. Just sort of let it be water off a duck's back kind of thing. You know, you accept with it, you've done what you can. Yes, and as they always say, like, if you're both married at the end of the day to one another, like, it's been a success. Yeah. That said, so it's putting in enough details that your day goes smoothly. What you don't want, obviously, is to get to the day and realise you haven't thought about logistical things, like how you want things to be. Like, if there's not enough thought gone into the details of the day, you're going to spend your day stressing, answering people's questions, potentially arguing a little bit with your new spouse, or just there's going to be like friction, tension. You're going to end up effectively working your wedding rather than enjoying your wedding. So this is what kind of preparation is really key. So yeah, a little bit of attention to detail is important. And so I'm a very organised person, and I find it really hard to be just chill about it, be fine. And it's different as well. So if you're having like a on the day coordinator, like if you are someone that doesn't have the attention for details and that kind of thing, maybe consider hiring a wedding coordinator or someone to act in that role, so that you can, ahead of the day, they will know what all those little detailed questions to ask you, so you can have thought about them, told this person, and then they can deal with it.
Out
yeah. Yeah. Know where your skills lie and what's going to make you happy, because we just want you to have a good day when it comes down to it.
And unfortunately, there aren't little wedding fairies who will just do all that for you if you haven't employed somebody.
Yes.
So yeah, just know your limits. Know where your skill set lies.
Yes.
Yeah. So there are just 5 pieces of unhelpful advice that we think are quite common and have heard quite a lot. Have you heard these pieces of advice? What other unhelpful advice have you been told? And what are you doing about it, if anything? Are you listening to it? Are you ignoring it? If you like this video, give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, and we'll see you next week.